Shalom, and welcome to Light of the Hill Ministries. In today's teaching, we will be talking about Pesach, or as it's commonly called, Passover and unleavened bread. If you want to follow along, I will be posting this in the comment box below. Now, onto the teaching. And they shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings. Exodus 12, verse 6. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evening, is the Passover of Yahweh. Leviticus 23, verse 5. On the 14th day of this month, between the evenings, perform it at its appointed time. According to all its laws and right rulings, you perform it. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel to perform the Passover. So they performed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month between the evenings in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that Yahweh commanded Moshe. So the children of Israel did. Numbers 9, verses 3 through 5. And in the first month, on the 14th day, is the Passover of Yahweh. Numbers 28, verse 16. But at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell, there you slaughter the Passover in the evening. At the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. Deuteronomy 16, verse 6. Clearly, the slaughtering of the Passover was to be done on the 14th day of the first month at evening, remembering that the Hebrew day begins with the evening, or the setting of the sun. The question is raised as to what is meant by the Hebrew phrase commanding that the Passover be slaughtered between the evenings. So since the day begins with the evening and ends with the evening, we must determine which part of the day the sacrifice was to be made. There are few who believe and teach that the Pesach was sacrificed at sundown on the 13th day as the sun was going down into the 14th day. This view is clearly contrary to the Torah. The Torah tells us that it was in the middle of the night when Yahweh went through the land of Egypt, judging the firstborn of the Egyptians. And Moshe said, "Thus said Yahweh, about midnight I'm going into the midst of Mitzrayim." Exodus 11, verse 4. And it came to be at midnight that Yahweh smote all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. Exodus 12, verse 29. The Torah also makes it clear that the children of Israel left Egypt that morning on the 15th day of the first month. And the children of Israel set out from Ramses to Succoth, about 6,000 men on foot, besides the little ones. Exodus 12, verse 37. So they departed from Ramses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month. On the morrow of the Passover, the children of Israel went out with boldness before the eyes of all the Mizrahites. Numbers 33, verse 3. Two other details help to establish the time of day for the Pesach slaughtering. The first of these details is the fact that the blood had to be placed on the doorposts of the house prior to the middle of the night of Yahweh's passing over. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the two doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. None of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning, and Yahweh shall pass on to smite the Mizrahites, and shall see the blood on the lintel and the two doorposts, and Yahweh shall pass over the door, and not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you. Exodus 12, verses 22 through 23. The second detail is that none of the meat from Pesach was to be left over until the morning. And do not leave of it until morning. Of what remains of it until morning you were to burn with fire. Exodus 12, verse 10. From these verses, we may deduce that the Pesach was slaughtered between the evenings, between noon and sunset, on the 14th and the first evening or beginning of the 15th. The blood of the Pesach was applied to the doorposts, and the meat of the Pesach was eaten at unleavened bread at the beginning of the first evening of the 15th before midnight. In the morning of the 15th, the remaining meat of the Pesach was burned on the fire, and the children of Israel began their exodus from Egypt. The Torah is very specific as to how the meat of Pesach is to be prepared. They shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Exodus 12, verse 8. It is eaten in one house. You are not to take any of the flesh outside the house, nor are you to break any bone of it. Exodus 12, verse 46. Beyond the meat of Pesach, the Torah prescribes two other elements for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. On the 14th day of the second month, between the evenings, they perform it. With unleavened bread and bitter herbs, they eat it. Numbers 9, verse 11. The Torah also tells us we're to eat this meal and why we're to eat this meal in such a specific fashion. And this is how you eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Passover of Yahweh. Exodus 12, verse 11. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mitzrayim in haste, so that you remember the day which you came out of the land of Mitzrayim all the days of your life. Deuteronomy 16, verse 3. We're also told by the Torah who is allowed to participate in this Pesach. Again, let us be clear that the Pesach is the offering, while the unleavened bread is the feast. Pesach is a ritual slaughtering that is meant only for those who covenant with Yahweh. Pesach and unleavened bread are a remembrance and celebration of what Yahweh did for the descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, of those whom he delivered, redeemed, and brought to himself at Mount Sinai. Pesach and unleavened bread are a celebration of the birth of a nation that lives by the Torah. Even from a new covenant perspective, Pesach, Yahweh's sacrifice, and unleavened bread, our deliverance from a life of bondage to sin, the leaven of man-made religions, are a celebration of the deliverance from bondage to sin and death, and the freedom to enter into the new covenant with Yahweh. Therefore, only those who are willing to leave the old leaven of their lives behind them, apply the blood of the Pesach to their lives, circumcise their heart, and willingly enter into covenant with Yahweh Elohim, should participate in this event. And Yahweh said to Moshe and Aaron, "This is the law of the Passover. No son of a stranger is to eat of it, but any servant a man has bought for silver, when you have circumcised him, then let him eat of it. A sojourner, a hired servant, does not eat of it. It is eaten in one house. You are not to take any flesh outside the house, nor are you to break any bone of it. All the congregation of Israel are to perform it. And when a stranger sojourns with you, and you shall perform the Passover to Yahweh, Let his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and perform it, and he shall be as a native of the land. But let no uncircumcised eat of it. There is one Torah for the native born, and for the stranger who sojourns among you. Exodus 12, verses 43 through 49. We must understand that the Pesach and unleavened bread are not the same as Thanksgiving dinner or some other family get-together. They are Yahweh's appointed rehearsals. It is a time for believers to gather together and celebrate and relive the wonderful and awesome things that Yahweh did for us. It is a time for us to remember the great price that was paid for us so that we can once again re-enter the covenant relationship with Yahweh Elohim. It is also a time for us to rehearse for Yahweh's future fulfillment for the greater Exodus. This set-apart remembrance is a time for parents to solemnly explain to their children why we live as we live, why we walk as we walk, why we dress as we dress, why we eat as we eat. It is a time to explain not only our awesome deliverance, but also our awesome calling and responsibility as the chosen people of Yahweh Elohim. While the children of Israel departed from Egypt on the 15th day of the first month, we remember this departure by departing from slavery to the mainstream materialism of the world we are often in bondage to. Thus, the first day of unleavened bread is a day of rest. On this day, we celebrate our freedom from labor and spend time worshiping, praying, and reliving the mighty deliverance that is at the heart of our identity as a people of Yahweh. After 7 days of eating unleavened bread, we conclude the celebration with yet another day of rest on the 21st day of the first month. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month between the evenings, is the Passover to Yahweh, and on the 15th day of this month is the festival of unleavened bread to Yahweh. 7 days you eat unleavened bread. On the first day you have a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. And you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahweh for 7 days. On the 7th day is a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. Leviticus 23, verses 5 through 8. Here we may take note that seven is a number of spiritual perfection. Thus, this gathering is to remind us that we are to live perfectly before Yahweh. We are to be set apart as He is set apart, and be perfect as He is perfect. Therefore, be perfect as your Father in the heavens is perfect. Matthew 5, verse 48. It is during this last special day of the celebration that we should truly understand that the leaven that matters is not that of yeast, but that of sin and the mixture of Yahweh's word and man's words. It is during this last celebration that we should be resolved to truly keep the Torah to the best of our ability without leavening it with pagan practices or man's reason. To sum up, how to celebrate Passover and unleavened bread on the 14th and 15th. Make sure your lamb is cooked and dinner is ready before sunset. Before sunset, put a symbol of blood on the doorpost. We use wine since wine is a symbol of Yahweh's blood, who is our lamb. We pray before sunset over the house and the household. After this is done, enter the home and stay there until the next morning. While in the home, sing songs and psalms. After this, tell the story of the Passover through scriptures. Exodus chapters 1 through 15 would be a good way to tell the story. Then afterwards, sing songs and wait until morning. This is what my wife and I do. And we hope that you will join us this Passover to celebrate Yahweh's deliverance. Yahweh bless. Hallelujah. If you like this teaching, please comment, like, share, subscribe, and click on the notification button to be notified of the next teaching. Yahweh bless, and shalom to your homes.